على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So last time we had reached the second section. So we finished the second section, باب تحذير من الكذب على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the chapter concerning or warning against lying on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today, inshallah, we're going to start the next chapter. And again, these chapter headings are from who? From Nawawī or from Qādī Iyyaḍ, right? So these are the two most famous explainers or shurrah of Imām Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ. The reason we moved into the lecture hall is because the sisters requested that we have the class in the lecture hall instead of the musalla, and so that's why we shifted it here. I think Sabri, he recommended, or he asked if the sisters would be okay in moving it back to the musalla, but we give you guys a mic. Again, that's totally up to you. The idea is that everybody feels like they're included in the class and that they have access to the teacher, and if they have any questions, you're more than welcome to stop me. All of you are familiar with my teaching style. All of you know that I have no problem being stopped in the middle of a discussion, or I like to engage with all of you. So having access to all my students is definitely important to me, and I want to make sure that you guys feel like you are important. One of the things that I wanted to share, I didn't get to share this, I've been meaning to share it for the last few classes, but Ibn Hajar, he says, تنازع قوم في البخاري ومسلم لدي وقالوا أي ذين يقدموا فقلت لقد فاق البخاري صحة كما فاق في حسن الصناعة مسلم. So over here he said that between Bukhari and Muslim there's a debate on which one is actually better, and he said from in terms of a grading standpoint and which one is more authentic, then Bukhari is to be given preference. And he said the second part of it, but in terms of order and organization, then Muslim is given preference. So just a few questions like I always like doing before we start the class. What was Imam Muslim's name? Muslim? Ahsant, good. Muslim, what was his father's name? Hajjaj. What was his grandfather's name? Muslim, ahsantum. And where was he born? Naysapur. And where did he die? Naysapur. His most famous teachers? Imam Bukhari. When did he meet him? After what? After he wrote his Sahih. After he wrote his Sahih, that is when he met Imam Bukhari, which is why he does not have a single narration on Imam al-Bukhari and his Shaykh. Another one of his famous mashayikh, who was also a not just I don't even want to say contemporary, but like sort of an adversary of Imam Bukhari. وينك يا سالم في أي عصر أنت يا أخي؟ Who was his? We had a famous story. This is one of the individuals who actually was advocate. He told him not to take from Bukhari. So he said to Imam Muslim, he said, either you choose me or Bukhari. And Imam Muslim chose? He chose Imam Bukhari. Who was this famous scholar? Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. All right, it's important to remember some of these names. Why? Imam Bukhari actually what? He narrates from him in his Sahih, even though he is an adversary of his. What does that tell us and show us? The sincerity and the justice of the muhaddithin. Yeah, I mean, even though he might not respect him on a personal level, he still had to be. He had to be just, right? He had to be just because he was a narrator of hadith and he was recording them. Radiyallahu anhu wa rahimahu.
I don't understand. You said they don't respect each other on a personal level, but why? Like they have different views or opinions. Yeah, it was the issue of the khalq al-Quran on whether the Quran was created or not, and basically. You had Imam Bukhari, he had a very famous book called Juz al-Qira'ah, which was, he spoke on the entire subject. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli didn't really like his answer. he didn't feel he was clear enough, and he felt like he was on the madhab of the mutakallimin at that time, known as the Mu'tazila, and that's why he warned against them. Actually, Imam Bukhari, I mean, subhanAllah, his seerah requires its own time. It really does. This individual was a genius. Even he has two famous books. His most famous book is what? His Sahih, right? Sahih Bukhari. And his second most famous book, I don't know if you guys are aware. Tarikh, ahsant, right? Tarikh al-Kabir. Tarikh al-Kabir was a book of narrators that he had put together, and he had compiled writing about all of the different narrators. And he says about himself that when he was sitting in Masjid al-Nabawi in the night, he would write his Sahih, but during the day he would write his Tarikh. Rahimahullah wa radiyan. So Imam Muslim, there's a very, very famous story in Hadith Sari, which is Ibn Hajar's explanation. It's his
introduction to his explanation of Imam Bukhari's Ṣaḥīḥ, it's called Hadith Sari. He talks about Imam Muslim sitting with Imam Bukhari and how Imam Bukhari how he recognized his knowledge, and how he had said to Imam Bukhari, I wish I could just kiss your feet, and had I known about you, and I wish I had spent more time with you. But there are a lot of good stories, but like I said, Imam Bukhari's life and his legacy, it deserves a discussion of its own. There's one of the brothers really put together a series of nice tweets. I'll try to find it for you guys, but I want you guys to read it. It's on the life and times of Imam Bukhari. The other thing that I actually discovered, subhanAllah, I wish I had told you guys this before, but you guys know sunnah.com, you ever heard of it?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, so the translations are like hit and miss. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But Imam Muslim's muqaddimah, or his introduction, is actually translated. So if you guys want to follow along, you can, and we can see how good the translation actually is. Not to say my translation is any better, but we'll try, inshallah. So today, inshallah, we're going to talk about bab al-nahy an al-hadith bi kulli ma sami'. So over here, Imam al-Nawawī, he titles this section of the book saying that it is prohibited to narrate on everything that on everything that you hear. Why is that? And what does that say about a narrator? So if I narrate everything that someone tells me, what does that say about me as a narrator?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure, no problem. So it does, like, so he comes to me and narrates, he comes to me and narrates, she comes to me and narrates, he comes to me and narrates. Everybody tells me, I push it forward. There's no vetting. Ahsant, tayyib, but why is that a problem?
Because not everybody's opinion could be
narrate all the hadiths.
So that's the narration concerning Umar and some of the other narrations that we had talked about. That was him narrating. Right, and he's talking about the Prophet ﷺ. And what was it that he feared?
He feared that if he said something wrong.
Yes. So a lot of the Sahaba, they feared if they said something wrong, that they were scared to share that information. Which is why you have some Sahabi who narrated less, and some who narrated more. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about Tadween and the compilation of the Sunnah, and why that happened, and if that's the case, did we lose a hadith, right? If that's the case. But inshallah, that's during the compilation when we talk about Tadween, and that'll be in the Hadith Sciences class. But over here, I just want to talk to you guys like on a very logical level. Why is it a problem to narrate everything I hear?
There's no way we can accurately...
Ahsant, right? There's one very clear hadith. If an individual narrates something, he is one of the two liars. Meaning, who are the two liars? Right, either me or the person I'm narrating it from. Is that a good position to be in? No, absolutely not. So either there's a very strong possibility that I'm forwarding a lie. Not just that. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us? If an individual, if a sinner comes to you with a piece of information, so you are supposed to what?
Verify.
You're supposed to verify. So verification is something that is inherent. It's a very important part of the religion. So let's see what Imam Muslim has to say, inshallah. And like I said, you guys can follow along. It is the 3rd chapter. You can go to sunnah.com. وحدثنا عبيد الله بن معاذ العنبري قال حدثنا أبي وتحويل الإسناد وحدثنا محمد بن المثنى قال محدثنا عبد الرحمن بن مهدي قال حدثنا شعبة عن خبيب بن عبد الرحمن عن حفص بن عاصم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كفى بالمرء كذبا أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. That it is enough for an individual to be considered a liar to narrate everything that he hears. So over here, do you guys notice anything special in the isnad, or does anything stand out? So we have Hafs ibn Asim, Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's okay. Right, skip the Sahabi. The Sahabi is actually Abu Huraira, as we'll see in the following narration. قال وحدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة قال حدثنا علي بن حفص قال حدثنا شعبة عن خبيب بن عبد الرحمن حفص بن عاصم عن أبي هريرة. So over here he connects the isnad. Over here he connects the isnad. In the previous one he doesn't mention it, and over here he connects it. He says عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بمثل ذلك. Right, similar to it. So the reason he's doing this is to show that the previous chain is actually no, not weak. It's actually to show that the previous chain is actually connected. That the hadith of Hafs is actually what? It's actually sahih. It's actually sound, even though he didn't mention the companion. And why do we know that? Because in the following chain, we find out who the companion, who he narrates from, is. Why is it a problem when the companion is missing?
Because it's not sahih anymore.
Why?
You said, yeah.
So if I'm a tabi'i, right? If I'm a student of a companion and I say the Prophet ﷺ said, why is that a problem? Who is the person who's missing?
You narrated from the person you narrated.
The person I narrated from is missing, but who is he?
You don't know who it is.
Ahsant. It could be another tabi'i, right? It could be another student. It's not necessary that it is a companion, right? It's not necessarily it's a companion, except there's one exception that some of the muhaddithin made. I don't know if you guys are aware. Ya Shafi. Sa'id ibn Musayyib. Right? Sa'id ibn Musayyib, why? Because all of his teachers were companions. All of his teachers were companions. He was considered a senior tabi'i, rahimahullah.
Can you explain one more time what you mean by you have to mention whether he's a tabi' or like sahabi?
Sure. If it's a tabi'i and he says the Prophet ﷺ said, is that a problem?
So I'm not.
It's a huge problem because there's a gap between him and the Prophet ﷺ, right? But if the companion is there, khalas, it becomes easy, because the companions. What are the possibilities? If a companion says the Prophet ﷺ said, like for example, we have many hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha that talk about the beginning of revelation. Why is that a problem?
Or could be.
Huh?
Or could be a problem. She wasn't there.
No, she wasn't there. Right, it's a potential issue. No, jazakallah khair.
They weren't during the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Of course. So it's not possible that they heard the Prophet ﷺ say something, because if they heard the Prophet ﷺ say something, they would be what?
They should have been during his era.
They would have been a sahabi. في مخضرمين. What is a mukhadram? A mukhadram is a tabi'i who lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but never met the Prophet ﷺ. يعني ومثلهم يعني أويس القرني, a very famous. People think he is a companion when in actuality he wasn't. He met Umar radiallahu anhu, and the Prophet ﷺ knew of him. Right, he knew of him. He said, "There's a man from Yemen, كان بار لوالديه," that he was obedient to his mother, and if anything he asked from Allah, Allah would give him. Huh?
He heard from the Sahaba, but he never met the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
But he lived during the time. Versus general tabi. A tabi is not necessary that he lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He could have lived after he ﷺ passed, but he met a companion. Yeah. نعم تفضل.
So when Hafs,
Mm-hmm.
he just does rough himself, right?
Yeah.
So does that weaken him as a narrator?
No, it doesn't. So sometimes you have this thing called tadlis, right? So tadlis, basically, for example, all of you study with me. Is it necessary that you've heard everything that I've said? No, but is it possible, like for example, that Shayma says that, well, Sheikh Farhan said such and such? Mm-hmm. It's very possible, right? Is it necessary that she was there? No, it's not. Does she need to give the isnad every time? Well, I heard Uthman tell me, that Miguel told him that Sheikh Farhan said such and such. It's not necessary, because it's known that the Sheikh said this, thing, and it's the same thing. When did the isnad become an issue? Why did they need isnad? Why do we have one? This we studied in class, so I'm not going to let you guys go for this. Fabrications. When did these fabrications start? Did they start early or late?
Late.
They started very early, right? They started very early during the time of who? Or after the death of Uthman radiallahu anhu. So this is why you have scholars like Ibn Sirin, they're talking about these things. لَمَّا وَقَعَ الْفِتْنَةِ, يعني when the fitna happened, what fitna are they talking about? They're talking about the death of Uthman, because what happened at the death of Uthman? The rise of, not just the Khawarij, but the Shia as well. And we're going to mention many examples of them, like Imam Muslim actually mentions a number of examples.
When you say early or late, early in, what do you classify as early?
Early in hadith literature. So in hadith literature, you're talking, when was he killed?
A few years after the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Right, so he was killed like 26 years or something, like after the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi
Wasallam.
Well, I don't know.
630, 650.
But so like Khilafat Abu Bakr was 2.5 years, Khilafat Umar was 10, and I think his was like 12, right? So yeah, so you're talking about 23 years after the death of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and this is when they started rising. This is what became a problem after the death of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was killed, radiyallahu anhu. So yeah, so because 656 is like, that's the Gregorian death of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
656
or something like that. Yeah.
630.
ما أدري يا أخي, I don't know. I know يعني 13 يعني. وحدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال أخبرنا هشيم عن سليمان التيمي عن أبي عثمان النهدي قال عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه تعالى بحسب المرء من الكذب أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. He said it is enough for a man to narrate everything to be considered a liar. Again, so now not only do we have one companion, but we have a second companion, Umar radiallahu anh, narrating the same thing. He goes on to say, وحدثني أبو طاهر أحمد بن عمرو بن صرح قال أخبرنا ابن وهب قال لي مالك. So Malik here is who? Imam Malik, Imam Dar al-Hijrah. اعلم أنه ليس يسلم رجل حدث بكل ما سمع. That it is a person will not be saved if he narrates everything that he hears. ولا يكون إماما أبدا, and he will never be considered an imam. وهو يحدث بكل ما سمع, and like he can never be considered an imam if he narrates everything that he said. Now over here we have two companions, and then after this he talks about Imam Malik. Why? Why doesn't he continue narrating from companions?
He ran out.
He's showing you from the different he's showing you from the different tabaqat. He's showing you from the different levels, and not just that it is okay to take fatwa. It is okay to take fatwa from imams especially if it is supported by not by strong chains, by prophetic statements. Right? If you have a prophetic statement and then you have an imam giving fatwa in that, what does that help me? How does that help me as a researcher or as a student of knowledge? It reinforces the what? You talked about منطوق ومفهوم, صح? You talked about منطوق ومفهوم, yes? طيب شو الدخل هاي?
So that understanding of the prophetic statement.
أحسنت. Right, this understanding is the right one. Right, the way the Prophet ﷺ said it, there's no other way to understand it. And this reinforces a particular understanding of that. قال حدثنا محمد بن المثنى قال حدثنا عبد الرحمن قال حدثنا سفيان عن أبي إسحاق يعني السبيعي عن أبي الأحوص عن عبد الله قال عبد الله who was here? أبي الأحوص is a student of who? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. قال بحسب المرء من الكذب أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. It is enough for an individual to be considered a liar because he narrates everything that he hears. وحدثنا محمد بن المثنى قال سمعت عبد الرحمن بن مهدي يقول لا يكون الرجل إماما يقتدى به حتى يمسك عن بعد ما سمع. Is that a man will never be considered an imam that is to be followed unless he withholds himself from narrating everything that he hears. And again, over here, the scholar is Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi. This is not a statement of this is not a prophetic statement. قال وحدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال أخبرنا عمر بن علي ابن المقدم عن سفيان بن حسين قال سألني إياس ابن معاوية فقال إني أراك قد كلفت بعلم القرآن فاقرأ علي سورة وفسر حتى أنظر فيما علمت. قال ففعلت فقال لي احفظ علي ما أقول لك إياك والشناعة في الحديث فإنه قلما حملها أحد إلا ذل في نفسه وكذب في حديثه. So over here you have an individual, Iyas ibn Muawiyah. He goes to Sufyan ibn Hussein and he says to him, he says that I see that you've been given a portion of the Quran. I see that you've been given a lot of the Quran. So please explain this to me. Please explain some of it to me so that I can see what you have been taught or I can see what you have learned. So I did that. He said I did that for him. And then he said, remember this. I want you to remember, I'm going to tell you something that I want you to remember. إِيَّاكَ وَالشَّنَاعَ. Don't be impulsive in your narration of hadith. Meaning, don't narrate everything that you hear, right? Don't be impulsive. Just because you hear something, it doesn't mean that it is necessarily right. فَإِنَّهُ قَلَّمَا حَمَلَهَا. Because it is very few individuals that do this, except that they fall into lying, right? Fall into misguidance and to lying. Like he misguides himself. ضَلَّ فِي نَفْسِهِ. He misguides himself. Because when I start narrating a number of things that I hear from other people, what do I start thinking about myself? That I'm knowledgeable and that I know something. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. وحدثني أبو طاهر وحرملة ابن يحيى قال أخبرنا ابن وهب قال أخبرني يونس عن ابن شهاب عن عبيد الله بن عبد الله بن عتبة أن عبد الله بن مسعود قال ما أنت بمحدث قوم حديثا لا تبلغه عقولهم إلا كان لبعضهم فتنة. Over here, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, this is his statement now. This is not a prophetic statement. He says, do not narrate to a people. Do not narrate to the people that do not understand. Do not narrate to a people that do not understand, except that some of them will be a trial. Meaning that they will take what you say and what? They'll distort it. Why? Because they don't understand. They don't comprehend it themselves. They don't comprehend it themselves. So this is something that's really important. And I remember we were talking about it's not one of the conditions, but one of the things that help us understand how to deal with a hadith is what? That the narrator himself, what? What are one of the characteristics that he should have?
He understands.
That he understands. Yeah, he understands what he hears, right? He understands what he hears. If he doesn't understand what he hears, the chances of him misconstruing are higher. باب في الضعفاء والكذابين ومن يرغب عن حديثهم. قال وحدثنا محمد بن عبد الله بن نمير وزهير بن حرب قال حدثنا عبد الله بن يزيد قال حدثني سعيد بن أبي أيوب قال حدثني أبو هاني عن أبي عثمان مسلم بن يسار عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال سيكون في آخر أمتي أناسا يحدثونكم ما لم تسمعوا, that there will come at the end of times a group of people that will narrate to you that which you do not or you have not heard previously. أنتم ولا أباكم, nor you, nor your fathers. فإياكم وإياهم, so woe to you and woe to them. طيب. Here the Prophet ﷺ is warning two groups of people. He's warning us as the ones who are listening, and he's warning those individuals who are narrating those narrations. طيب. Our warning, how do we benefit from it? I feel like I'm talking to myself.
How do we benefit from this warning?
How do we benefit from this hadith? The Prophet ﷺ is saying, I'm warning you and I'm warning them. What is he warning us of? That there are going to be such people? Tayyib, awareness. What else? What is my responsibility now? To verify, ahsant, and to filter. Good. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. we got to start. Where's Zamzam, man? She didn't bring her super healthy tea today? Yeah, tafadhal.
Question. Can this be extended to like ghiba and backbiting?
So ghiba and backbiting, we'll talk a little bit about that. Because the thing is, when it comes to, because we're going to talk about narrator criticism, and does that construe backbiting or not, right? So this is just dealing with information. Ghiba in and of itself is what? It's haram, right? Ghiba in and of itself is haram. But information is mubah. Right? Information is mubah. Information is like, it's permissible. The question is like, okay, this information that I'm getting, when does it become impermissible? When I don't verify. Ahsan. Yeah, Uthman, you were going to say something? Okay. تفضل يا أخي.
How do we
verify?
Hold this about not narrating everything we hear, and then the prophetic injunction about spreading his words,
sure,
because there's someone who might understand more.
Zayd, mumtaz. Number one, are we narrators?
No.
We're not. No. I'm saying, yeah, also tadween is done. Like, so the narration is done. Narration's finished. And why do I say that? Because خلاص يا أخي, the hadith mudawwan, everything's written. Even the chains that we have now, like for example, my chain, does it verify Bukhari is the real book? Like my ijaza. So here I have an ijaza for Muslim, I have ijaza for Bukhari, and all these other books. Does it verify that book exists? Yes? Mine? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Yeah, no, and the reality is, man, like even if you go through these chains that have these ijazat, some of these guys, like, you have no idea who they are. Like, I'm being very honest. Like, going through these chains of narration, some of the mashayikh, you have no idea. Like, they'll just be like, who is he? Oh, he's the sheikh of the person before him. Like, that's the only information that you have about that person. And it's not wrong, but these ijazat, what is the purpose behind them? It can be used as a secondary verification, but can it be used as a primary one? Even today, how do I do a primary verification of a book? Do I go back and be like, okay, let me collect everybody's ijazah? I would actually go to the maqsood. I would actually go to the manuscript. Right? I would go to the manuscript. I'm not going to people. Right? I'm not going to individuals. I'm going to actual books. I'm going to the actual manuscripts. Make sense? It doesn't make sense? What doesn't make sense? How do I verify a book?
No, but how are you going to verify the book when you don't know what source is reliable? Let's say you don't know what source is reliable.
Define source. Define source. It's an arif masdar, an arif tarjuma. But I'm saying, like, what is it? The source over here, Yahi, is the printed book itself.
Okay.
Is it in his handwriting? If I carbon copy the paper, is it in the right period? Right? Is this one of the well-known narrators of the book? right? So over here, we had talked about it in the first class. The number of major narrators of Muslim are how many? In the first tabaqah. You want to talk about resources? No. Like, so the Sahih Muslim, Imam Muslim didn't go to the matba', right? He didn't go to the printing house and be like, hey, listen, can you go ahead and print this for me? Yeah.
Still wasn't printing house at the time.
I agree. So how did it reach us?
Oh, I see. Who are his students?
His students, right? There is his students who had to carry it on, and he had 4 major students, and out of those 4 students, one was the one whose I would say whose variant was the one that was preserved. Right, his was the one that was preserved, and his went to like 5 students. Those 5 students, they had their own, you know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of how it reached us today, because they all had their written ones. And again, we had talked about this in the, I think we talked about, it was the first or the second class, we talked about manuscripts. I think it was the second class. Watch the video, of course, yeah. That's what they're there for. They're there to preserve, right? You know what I mean? So if you want to see, the source is the video. So anyway. You can hear it directly from me, inshallah. So over here, we said that this warning is not only a warning it's a warning to us so that we learn to verify, and it's a warning to them because now we know not to trust their narrations and trust their information. قال وحدثني حرملة ابن يحيى ابن عبد الله ابن حرملة ابن عمران التجيبي قال حدثنا ابن وهب قال حدثني أبو شريح أنه سمع شراحبيل بن يزيد يقول أخبرني مسلم بن يسار أنه سمع أبو هريرة رضي الله عنه يقول قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يكون في آخر الزمان دجالون كذابون يأتونكم من الأحاديث بما لم تسمعوا أنتم ولا آباؤكم فإياكم وإياهم لا يضلونكم ولا يفتنونكم. So over here there's a hadith of Abu Hurairah where he says on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that there will come at the end of times dajjalun. There will be many dajjal and many liars, and they will come to you with ahadith. They will come to you with ahadith. They will come to you with narrations that you are not familiar with and you have not heard. Not you nor your forefathers. فَإِيَّاكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ يعني I warn you and I warn them. لَا يُضِلُّونَكُمْ وَلَا يُفْتِنُونَكُمْ that these individuals, they will not misguide you and they will not be a fitna, they will not be a trial for you. Why? Because we know. Ahsant. Like all of the muhaddith, scholars of hadith have worked, and all of the correct hadith have been preserved for us, and that's why these individuals will not be a problem for al-Ummah al-Islamiyah.
Yeah, there's another hadith, Sheikh, I want to mention, in order to avoid the Dajjal. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم من قرأ أول 10 آيات من سورة الكهف عصم من الدجال. يعني does this correlate to what you said or not?
So over here, Dajjal is used as sigh al-mubalagha. It's used as an exaggeration to represent liars, because Dajjal, he's known to be a great liar, right? So it's meant to be like a mithal. It's not meant to be like actual like little Dajjals running around, right?
So what I said, this hadith.
That's different. That's different. But it doesn't have to do with this. Interestingly enough, Imam Malik, he has a different jama' of Dajjal. I don't know if you guys know, like the Dajjala. I always thought that was funny. But anyway, the Dajjala. قال وحدثني أبو سعيد الأشج قال حدثنا وكيع قال حدثنا الأعمش عن المسيب ابن رافع عن عامر ابن عبده قال عبد الله يعني ابن مسعود إن الشيطان يتمثل في صورة الرجل. That shaitan comes in the form of an individual فيأتي القوم فيحدثهم في الحديث من الكذب. So he narrates to them a hadith that is a lie. فيتفرقون, so that the people start differing amongst themselves. فيقول رجل منهم, so one of the people says سمعت رجلا أعرف وجهه ولا أدري ما اسمه يحدث. That I heard someone say, but I don't remember what he looks like. I heard someone say something, but I don't remember what he looks like, and I don't know his name. So over here, again, is it possible that the shaitan takes the form of a man, or the individual himself is a shaitan because he's trying to cause problems? Yes, right, this is an absolute possibility, so that he causes problems and he causes fitna amongst the Muslims. وحدثني محمد بن رافع قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق قال أخبرنا معمر عن أبي طاووس عن أبيه عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص قال إن في البحر شياطين مسجونة أوثقها سليمان يوشك أن تخرج فتقرأ على الناس قرآنا. That in the river, or I'm sorry, in the ocean, there are shayateen that are captured. أوثقها سليمان, and Sulaiman is the one that captured them. Yes.
They know his face.
Oh, أعرف وجهه. I know what he looks like. جزاك الله خير. الله يبارك فيك. No. رجل أعرف وجهه. I know his face, but I don't know his name. جزاك الله خير.
With the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, then should we assume it's like marfu because of the subject matter?
Yeah, so you do have some khilaf on issues like this. Yeah, like in general. Like, so the thing is, like, at what level or at what point can you say that, okay, this is something that's ghaibi, it's something that's unseen, that they wouldn't have known? Or is it something that is implied, or something that is understood, or something that is stantaju, that they actually came to a conclusion based on some of the things that they heard from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? In general, no, right? In general, like anything that is considered unseen, they can't speak about it except if Allah or His Messenger had actually said something. But is it possible that they piece some things together in order to draw some of these conclusions? I think so. But this one, wallahu alam, I would imagine, because based on the other hadith that we have, that it is something that is prophetic.
This one
Yeah.
Okay. And then second, then does that mean, like, for example, the characterization of like some avoiding a mubham narrator is like a prophetic injunction?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, man. Like staying away from majhulin, it's important. But khair, no, absolutely. Inna fil bahr shayateen. Okay, so over here, this hadith is one that's a little bit more problematic because it's something that is ghaibi. But Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he was known to also narrate what? Isra'iliyat, right? So he was known to actually narrate some of the narrations from Ahl Kitab. Is this from them? Wallahu alam. But so over here, I always, this story is the one that's always, I found it interesting. So basically, there in the ocean, there are these containers that hold jinn because Sulaiman alayhi salam, he actually captured them. And I fear that these shayateen will actually come out and they will read the Quran to the people, so that the people end up what? Either trusting them or misconstruing the Quran, right? One of the two. So does this story sound familiar? Like anything in American culture that you guys have heard? Like genies, right? Genie in a bottle. Like, so I think this is this is where it came from. Wallahu alam. Yeah, tafadhali. Huh? Yeah. You're gonna ask something?
Like similar where the shaitan has his kingdom in the ocean and an island that he senses.
Yes, there is one like that. Like, and then they all come back to him, and he asks him, like, "What did you do?" And he was like, "I got someone to stop praying." And then he was like, "This person, I got their family to, I got them to divorce." And then he was like, you have I mean, so you have a hadith like this. The question is like, where is this island? Is it something? Because the thing is, like with the shayateen and the jinn, do they live in the same dimension as we do? Or do they live in a completely different space altogether? And sometimes there's overlap. And wallahu alam, like it's something that's unseen. Yeah.
Are we allowed to criticize some of the Isra'iliyat, like the content-wise, if they sound a little strange?
Sure.
Or should we?
No. I mean, we can, but based on what? What criteria? Because even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Hadithu an bani Israel, wala haraj." Right? And turid an tukadhib Allah wa rasulahu. And do you want to lie on Allah and His Messenger? Meaning that you take these narrations with a grain of salt. And when do I say a Isra'iliyat or a narration from the people of the book is sound? If it agrees with Islam, how do I reject it? Right, when it negates. Right, when it negates. But like, for example, even the Isra'iliyat that we can't talk about, like what does it talk about? It'll talk about like the color of the dog in the cave. It'll talk about like the number of fighters like in a certain battle. I mean, like the information doesn't really have any it doesn't have any like bearing on our belief system or even on a lot of our rulings, honestly. The ones that that we can't support or we can't deny, but the ones that we can deny for sure, that they go against the Sharia. And so, for example, all of the hadith that talk about the ill actions of the prophets, right? We can reject those. Why? Because the Anbiya are ma'soom, right? The Anbiya are they're known to be in a sense, it's not a word, but sinless, right? They're known to be sinless, huh?
Divine protection.
Yeah, they're divine protection, sinless, so that's how they are. And because we believe that, it's not possible that those narrations would be acceptable. I think there's a good logical argument for why that's true. So if you have an individual who's in divine communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how is it possible that such a person would sin? Right? Like it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't, what I mean? Like it doesn't, like small mistakes, yes. Like I can imagine, I can picture that. But like zina or incest or like, what I mean? Like it's like not haram ya akhi, min al-kaba'ir. Min akbar al-kaba'ir. Yeah, I'm saying like خلاص, like the small sins تتجاوز غفلة, understandable, man, but like major sins is hard for me. Like you don't expect such things from the most wicked people, and then you have a prophet doing it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't Allah, you know what I mean? It doesn't sit well with me. وحدثني محمد بن عباد وسعيد بن عمرو الأشعثي جميعا عن ابن عيينة قال سعيد أخبرنا سفيان بن هشام بن هجير عن طاووس قال جاء هذا إلى ابن عباس. So this individual, he came, Ibn Bushair, he came to Ibn Abbas فجعل يحدثه, and he began narrating to him. فقال له ابن عباس, and Ibn Abbas said to him عد لي حديث كذا وكذا. He said, recite or repeat to me such and such hadith. فعاد له, so I repeated it to him. ثم حدثه, and then he narrated to him again. فقال له عد لي حديث كذا وكذا, and he said repeat such and such a hadith. فعاد له, so I repeated to him. فقال له ما أدري عرفت حديثي كله وأنكرت هذا. Is it possible that you know all of the narrations that I'm sharing with you, but you are negating these that you're asking me to repeat to you? Or is it that you're rejecting all of my hadith and only these two hadith you're actually accepting from me? فقال له ابن عباس, so Ibn Abbas, he said to him, إنا كنا نحدث عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذ لم يكذب عليه. He says that when we used to narrate on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when there was no lying at all, that nobody would lie on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فلما ركب الناس صعب الظلول وتركنا الحديث عنه. So when people, here he uses a statement that when people started following the difficult and the easy, meaning that they would just follow anything, right? They would just do whatever they wanted, they would just do anything. When people started doing that and they stopped differentiating, we stopped listening. We stopped listening to them. Why? Because now there's a chance that they were lying, right? And they weren't lying before. وحدثني محمد بن رافع قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق قال أخبرنا معمر عن ابن طاووس عن أبيه عن ابن عباس قال إنما كنا نحفظ الحديث والحديث يحفظ عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. That we used to memorize these hadith, and these hadith were memorized on the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. فأما إذا ركبتم كل صعب وظلول فهيهات. Yes.
Sheikh, just a quick question. You said
Yeah.
They were lying, but they weren't lying before. But
Yeah.
mumkin they were lying, but we didn't catch them lying.
It's not
possible.
It's not possible. It's not possible.
Yeah, and we can only catch them, and we know that they're lying.
Yeah. But even the ones that you don't know, how do you find out? We talked all about it in our hadith sciences class.
More errors than checks.
Yeah. Like you do comparison. You compare the hadith. You look at his other hadith. You look at his character. Right. There are a number of things that are looked at in order to find out how this person is speaking.
Yeah, I'm asking this question because what's their motive for lying? Yeah, they weren't lying before, but they're lying now.
For political and social status.
Okay.
And what was that? That's what bid'ah. That's what bid'ah was. That's what innovation was. So over here he says that we used to memorize on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فإذا ركبتم كل صعب وظلول فهيهات. And then when you started following everything, you stopped differentiating, then we distance ourselves. فهيهات, يعني we distance ourselves from you. وحدثني أبو أيوب سليمان بن عبيد الله الغيلاني قال حدثنا أبو عامر يعني العقدي قال حدثنا الرباح عن قيس بن سعد عن مجاهد قال جاء أبو شير العدوي إلى ابن عباس. and Abu Shair, this is the same one that we had talked about in the previous narration. فجعل يحدث ويقول قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فجعل ابن عباس لا يأذن لحديثه ولا ينظر إليه. So that this individual, he came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi, he came to Ibn Abbas and he started narrating and he started saying the Prophet sallallahu said. The Prophet sallallahu said, and he saw that Ibn Abbas was what? He wasn't listening. He wasn't paying attention. فقال يا ابن عباس, he said, Ibn Abbas, ما لي لا أراك تسمع لي حديثي. Why is it that you don't listen to my hadith? أحدثك عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, I narrate to you on the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تسمع, and you don't listen. فقال ابن عباس, so Ibn Abbas said, إن كنا مرة إذا سمعنا رجل يقول قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that there was a time that when we heard the people saying the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said ابتدرت أبصارنا, that our eyes would turn to him. وأصغينا إليه بأذاننا, and we would turn our ears to him. فلما ركب الناس الصعب والظلول, and when the people stopped differentiating, when they started taking things easy and they started taking things difficulty, لم نأخذ من الناس إلا ما نعرف, that we would not take from the people except that which we knew. قال وحدثنا داود بن عمرو الضبي قال حدثنا نافع ابن عمر عن ابن أبي مليكة قال كتبت إلى ابن عباس أسأله أن يكتب لي كتابا ويخفى عني فقال ولد ناصح أنا أختار له الأمور اختيارا وأخفي عنه. قال فدعا بقضاء علي فجعل يكتم منه أشياء وينمر به شيء فيقول والله ما قضى بهذا علي إلا أن يكون ضل. So over here you have another narration from Ibn Abi Mulaika. So basically he wrote to Ibn Abbas. He asked Ibn Abbas, he was asking him for advice, and he said to him, he says, can you put together a book for me that's summarized? He says, can you uktub li wala ukhfi? Yani don't make it too long. Take the repetitive things out of it, but if you could send me something summarized, فقال ولد ناصح, that this child he deserves to be advised. أنا أختار له الأمور اختيارا وأخفي عنه, that I will choose for him those things which are important, and those things which are not, I'm going to remove them, I'm going to hide them. قال فدعا بقضاء علي. So he called for Ali's book of Qada. Ali radiallahu anh, he had a collection of his different rulings. فجعل يكتم منه أشياء. So he took from the book, right? So he took down and he started transferring some of the rulings from Ali's book. ويمر بشيء, and he came across some things. فيقول والله ما قضى بهذا علي. So he would come across some of the rulings, and he said, man, Ali didn't make this ruling. Ali didn't make this ruling. إلا أن يكون ضال. And if he had, he would be misguided. Showing, and he knows that Ali radiallahu anhu, akid, he was not misguided. What is he basically saying here?
You can't trust books.
Not, you can't trust books. Huh? Well, he knows what he's talking. How does he know what he's talking about?
By knowing that something's wrong.
He knew something was wrong. So over here, is he ascribing it to Ali? No, he's ascribing it to who? The people who narrated from him, and this is going to take us into some of the reasons of why hadith were fabricated. Because who are the people who lean toward Ali? The Shia. So what did they do? Sometimes they would exaggerate some of his rulings, sometimes they would make rulings that would be in their favor. And this is why Ibn Abbas, when he came across it, he's like, no way, Ali didn't write this. This is not Ali's ruling. And he's not doubting Ali, he's doubting the people who are narrating, or people who collected it.
Even to this day, there's like certain quotes that they use, like field quotes, and it's completely
different people. Yeah.
Modern people.
Yeah. Subhanallah. Yeah. Allah musta'an. I think it's time for salah. Inshallah, we'll stop here and we'll continue bi-idhnillah next time. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.